오늘 사회를 보실 이리나 부코바 전 유네스코 사무총장 및 또 우리 대학의 후마니타스 명예대학장님 오늘 사회를 보실 텐데요. Madame Bukova, would you say hello to the audience? Yes. Thank you. 여러분 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다. 다음은 좀 전에 강연해 주신 우리 캠브리지 대학교의 피터 아담스 교수님 함께 자리해 주셨고요. 다음은 자파티 폴리 인스티튜트의 마리아 피아 카사리니 소장님 함께 자리해 주셨습니다. 다음은 콩고의 리베르토 바우티스타 회장님 자리해 주셨습니다. 다음은 와스의 게리 제이콥스 회장님 참석해 주셨습니다. 예. 기후변화센터의 김소희 사무총장님 함께 참석해 주셨습니다. 감사합니다. 다음은 극지연구소의 김성중 책임연구원님 함께 해주셨습니다. 예, 오늘 패런에 참석해 주신 여러분 환영드리고요. 뜻깊은 시간이 되기를 바랍니다. Now I'm turning microphone to Madam Irina Bukova. Would you please start? Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shin, and let me congratulate first and foremost Kyunhee University President Cho that the Peace Festival starts with such an important discussion today. I think this is really about the civilizational choices that we have to make and the very strong link between peace and climate change and the efforts that we need in order to mitigate them. And to thank, of course, Professor Wadham for this fantastic journey that you made through history, also with the expeditions, and to reassure you, and if President Cho and other here professors allow me to say on behalf of the Kyunhee University, you did mention when you received the book from President Cho that this came out of the blue. And I would try to reassure you that it did not come out of the blue, because I know the commitment of the Kyunhee University to discussing the issues about climate, about sustainability, about the social inclusion and everything that is linked to the global challenges that we confront, all of us, and the role of science and higher education in the intellectual input to finding the right solutions. So I think we have a fantastic panel here that are will be hopefully discussing the issue from all different sides. I will just leave Professor Wadhams now to maybe listen to us, and at the end I will ask him also a couple of questions. But I would like to turn first to Professor Maria Pia Casarini, who is also one of those advocates and strong, I would say, supporters of polar sciences, polar oceanographer. And what I would like particularly to emphasize is your very strong commitment to knowledge, to the history of how this science has evolved. Because I do believe, and listening to the presentation of Professor Wadhams, albeit we all are knowledgeable about climate change, we all read either in the scientific publications or in the world media press, we follow debates, we participate in many discussions, still there is so much to learn, so much that we need to know, so much to use as arguments in our discussions, particularly when we confront the policy decision makers. I know it from my personal experience because in my previous capacity as Director General of UNESCO last year, we launched the idea to have a decade of ocean science, very much linked also to the polar science, because we felt that still a lot of need for knowledge about it. So I would probably turn to you and to tell that you share your views on the topic that we are discussing today.
Certainly. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Well, it's first of all, President, thank you very much for inviting me together with Peter. Although I use my maiden name, I'm actually Peter Wadham's wife. We've been married 38 years. And I used to say that being with Peter, you live ice, you sleep ice. Ice is the common denominator. But since I'm not a scientist, I specialized in polar history, and then directing the Italian Polar Institute, I really have a much wider view. And the point about polar history is that it can teach so much. And the approach can also be from adventure point of view, because the old expeditions were, in fact, written in such a way that they become like novels, and more interesting than novels a lot of the time. And what is interesting was the interest of science, even from the very beginning, when exploration was more part of knowing the planet as it was at the time. And this brings also to pinpoint a very important side, which is education. I'm very lucky to belong to a fairly new society called Polar Educators International, and we want to form teachers in high school, primary school, middle school, whoever is interested in teaching about the polar regions. And it's a really exciting society. It's only been in existence officially for 5 years, but it's a very interesting point that if you get the young people to be interested in the polar regions, then they are our hope for the future, because they are the ones that will have to live with the consequences that Peter described, although people say Peter smiles a lot when he talks about these things, but they actually are very worrying for the planet. And I believe very much in education and also in the social sciences, because let's not forget, Peter talked about the Arctic from a scientific point of view, data gathering, but there are people living there. Let's not forget the Inuit. They live all over the Arctic, and they are the ones that are finding firsthand how difficult it is to change habits of centuries. Already they had to change with the so-called civilization coming to them, with hunting and their nomadic living that had to change during the past century. But above all, let's remember that they are the ones that will bear the brunt of climate change very much. And in a way, it is up to the first world nations to help these people, to educate the young and to help the Inuit.
Thank you very much, Professor Casarini. I think you touched a very important issue. It is about education. It is about people, because we speak about climate ice, and it's a fantastic, I would say, achievement of the science to know more about what is happening in order to mitigate. But the other side is that we're speaking about people. And the impact, the consequences about the people, either of the indigenous communities like the Inuits, but if you allow me, I would enlarge it a little bit, because the impact of this is global, and it's about people, be it on the coastal cities, be it in urban developments, be it in the desert because of the changing temperatures. And that is why I'm very happy that we have here with us Liberato Bautista, who is a president of the Congo, the Conference of Non-Governmental Organizations in the United Nations. It is as I would call it, or some kind of a third United Nations, if there are levels, it's the civil society, the United Nations, which becomes ever more important, because nowadays the challenges global are, of course, the primary responsibility of governments, but not only. It is about scientific community, it is about private sector, and it is about the civil society. And if you allow me, before I give you the floor, just one small note, because taking from the previous speaker, Madame Casarini, the ethics of climate change, speaking about people, the impact of it, and it was in the article, I think, of Professor Wadham, The World Without Ice, is that if either the methane or some of the other supposedly disasters, tragedies come, it will affect 80% of the developing countries. So the bearers of this will be really the poorest of the poor, the developing countries, which puts ethical questions also when we speak. And I would just want to remind that, of course, I'm very biased because I was with UNESCO, but UNESCO is the only United Nations organization. Last year, during the General Conference of UNESCO, I'm very proud, I was still Director General, we worked for 10 years to adopt a declaration on the ethical aspects of climate change, where we speak precisely about this. We speak about who bears, what is the development, how to reconcile, and the link between sustainable development and climate change. So if you could also comment on these issues.
Before I comment, may I congratulate as well Kyung-Hee University and thank the President for his continuing commitment to civilizational issues, such as climate change and drawing the nexus with peace, I think is very important. The topic is daunting, but let me start with an anecdote. As a schoolboy, mine was not a farewell to ice, it was a welcome to ice. I come from a tropical country, the Philippines, and it being a predominantly Christian country, the Christmas ornaments have always been adorned with snow, or at least cotton that resembled snow. And Christmas songs spoke of a white Christmas in a country like the Philippines. I grew up mixing a perfectly brewed American or German beer with ice cubes, to the consternation, I'm sure, of Germans who would have said, we perfected the formula of how much water, how much this, and how much that. And here you are diluting it with ice. So the romance with ice in my growing up years is such that it was not a farewell to ice, it was a welcome to ice. The Philippines was just visited by, again, the strongest hurricane that ever landed on Earth. Not to mention that 3 or 4 years ago, it also was the place where Typhoon Haiyan landed. And so the topic lends itself not just as a matter of science, about which I know nothing about. I was simply fascinated by Dr. Wadham's essay just now delivered. But also precisely what Dr. Bokova has mentioned, the ethical aspects of this very issue. The non-governmental organizations at the United Nations interface in this work by bringing what I call the reality from the ground and bringing it to the policymakers at the United Nations level, interfacing with member states at the United Nations. It's an important matter that you raised, Irina, which is the ethics of this issue, which for a shorthand, I might simply call an ethic of care, an ethic of earth care, an ethic which requires us to address the issue not so much even as it is important to look at the historical background, but we owe the next generation the care we can do now. In other words, non-governmental organizations' position has been that the science may continue to evolve, but the experience of global warming on the ground is real for people. And therefore, it behooves us to address the scarcity of food, and hence Dr. Wadham raising the issue of food production and therefore of food security. But the ethic of care does not only speak to our responsibility for the future generations to survive and to thrive, and therefore the emphasis on human rights and human dignity, but also the emphasis and the nexus, therefore, of this topic with global peace. If there's going to be only two major issues for me that are not only civilizational or transformative, this has got to be the issue of climate change and global migration. The global migration issue to me brings even more acutely the ethical question of what would make humanity flourish. And the Western legacy has been for human rights and human dignity to flourish. But climate change has changed all that, if I might say. That our relation to each other and our relation to the planet has been so imperiled as to call for a revisiting of what we call human rights in its most anthropocentric reference, and therefore the challenge to look at Earth rights in relation to our access to Earth as human beings. And so the ethics question is indeed a very important one, because it questions not only our responsibility to humanity and to the planet, but also the accountability of policymakers to make sure, if I may use the pillars of the United Nations, to make sure that people enjoy human rights and human dignity together with the dignity and integrity of the cosmos. And then that peace and security are not themselves imperiled because of global warming. You will recall that the United States National Security Council some 3 years ago have declared climate change as a national security issue. Most likely that is being revisited under Mr. Trump's administration, but that doesn't mean to say that it is no less a threat than it was in that first assessment then. And then, of course, the third pillar is sustainable development. The universal subscription to the Sustainable Development Goals underscore the complex and intricate relationship of human flourishing and the flourishing of the planet. And so the ethical responsibility, as well as, and I might add, and I'll end it there for now, as well as the kind of funding that must be given to multilateral institutions like the United Nations to be able to do what Dr. Wadham says are the necessary technologies and mitigation and disaster reduction measures that need to be done. But unfortunately, the trend is to defund the United Nations and other multilateral institutions. The moral and the ethical question, I might add, and I'll end it there, is that the United Nations budget is a moral budget. It's a moral document. We fund our morals, and if our morals are such that it has to do with human rights and human dignity, peace and security, and sustainable development, the funding must be given to those. And unfortunately, the trend is to defund those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bautista, and thank you for this very inspiring defense of the United Nations and multilateral system. I think we need indeed to look at this issue. And also I think you mentioned important aspect of the consequences about global migration, about future pressures. Professor Wadham also did mention some of the consequences, civil strife, the Arab Spring, some of the others. We know that climate refugees are on the rise and they will continue. Also, there is so much conflict over water. We know in Africa, Lake Chad and many other places. We know extremism, Boko Haram. All this is linked nowadays in a kind of a global tangle of challenges. And turning now to you, Mr. Jacobs, of course you're a famous writer and scholar and researcher, and also chairing the World Academy of Arts and Science, and you have also written extensively on education. I think it's something very important nowadays. Could I ask you to kind of continue elaborating on what Mr. Bautista said about the governance and also focusing on the issue of how to reconcile the sustainability agenda, the Agenda 2030, with the Paris Climate Agreement. We know still that there is, albeit Paris Climate Agreement was adopted by all world leaders, still this question stays in the public space and is used as an argument by some countries not to go that, I would say, strong into mitigating measures, into national commitments as prescribed by the Paris Climate Agreement for the sake of national development. I think this is this issue of how to reconcile is becoming key nowadays for both, for sustainable development and for climate mitigation in issues.
I too must commend Kyunghee University on this occasion of the International Peace Day of putting this issue on the first day and putting the UN and global governance on the last day, because I believe that this problem unfortunately cannot be solved strictly by technological means. And though I think we would all love that if it were true, because we don't know how to govern ourselves, and therefore we would love to know that we can rely on technology to do it. I think for all of us, I have heard this very erudite presentation. We are hearing a lot of this within the World Academy and the Club of Rome. The former chairman of IPCC, Rajendra Pachauri, sits on our board. He never lets us forget this. But the issue of the interdependence between climate and the SDGs, which another way to say that is, the interdependence between climate and economy and economic development and social stability and political governance, democracy, human rights, every other aspect. That's our real problem. Our real problem is that we have come to the point where we're dealing with issues that can't be, I believe, addressed independently in isolation from each other. And that brings us to the critical importance of the universities, because our governance structures are fragmented and divided internationally. As Thomas Weiss is going to tell us, we have the fragmentation of the UN organizations. We have the fragmentations of our academic disciplines. We have, more serious than that, the fragmentation of our theoretical frameworks. I'm particularly talking, one thing so dramatically illustrated by your fascinating presentation was the extreme complexity of the interdependence between physical factors. And that complexity, I believe, is even greater when it comes to the social sciences, with the social, economic, political dimensions, management dimensions, human rights dimensions. And yet, the world as a whole, we still are talking about these as separate worlds, separate universes. Our theoretical frameworks are divided from each other. So I think the the academic community has to play an enormous role and a radically new role in bringing together that which we have divided, in finding and integrating that which has been fragmented because of the tremendous growth of knowledge in so many different fields. And I think we all felt after listening to his presentation, we don't need to add any other problem to the list of things to be solved. I'm not trying to add a problem, I'm trying to say I think the solution lies in the way we are understanding the complexity of our society and the way we're managing it. Fortunately, we're going to have another session on Thursday where we're talking about global governance. And I think that we're going to hear there that the problem of effective global governance seems to be almost as challenging as the problem of managing our climate. We have similar factors at another level. So, and I would just like to say now, I think there's a solution to this problem, but I don't think it's a solution through incremental means. And if we look back historically on where we've had the biggest breakthrough in solving problems of all descriptions, it hasn't been through incremental changes that were predictable. Most of us have lived through the end of the Cold War, and I think if we remember back how unimaginable were the changes that took place between 1989 and 1993 in Europe. Just as one incident, in 1989 June, German Chancellor Kohl and Soviet President Gorbachev met, and they were talking about the future of Europe. And they both agreed that German reunification is inevitable. It has to happen, in spite of 70 years of Cold War and everything. But they also both agreed, and it's on paper, they've written, that it's likely to happen sometime in the 21st century. And yet, what actually happened was within 2.5 years, it was a reality. And I think we're going to need to see accelerated change in our international relations and management, which is unimaginable today. We would feel that we're talking pie-in-the-sky utopia, just as somebody talking in September of '89, talking about the end of the Cold War, the breakup of the Soviet Union, the dissolution of the Communist Party there, the spread of democracy, the reunification of Germany, was not something that you could have a serious academic debate about, because it just is too much wishful thinking. And I think what we need is to think through that process, to what is that breakthrough and what would be necessary for it. And I hope we'll have more time on Thursday to really explore that, because what this talk to me really resonates deeply is we don't have the time, and yet if you look in the past where we've really made dramatic progress, it seems to have only been in points where we didn't have the time to do it slowly. We needed the pressure of that. So the question to me is, how can we leverage the extreme pressure, the extreme complexity, the extreme consequences of allowing this process to go forward? And I think the frustration that all of us share is, we've known this for a long time. We've had warning about this, and yet, if anything, and I'm an American, so I can speak for, if anything, major players are going in the other direction and downplaying it at a time when it must be taken more seriously. And I live in India, and that's another challenge where a big contribution to it and the future of it is going to be. So I think the real issue for climatologists is to discuss the technical scientific aspect, but I think for us as a society, we really have to talk about how do we effectuate radical, rapid social change and what's the role of civil society, the educational institutions, the scientific community, and business community in that. We have to do something we've never done before. Otherwise, the pressure is simply going to get greater until we do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you for enlarging the scope of this discussion, particularly with the issue of governance. I think it's very important, and we will, of course, continue to discuss this the day after tomorrow. It's very much part of the multilateral reform that we're having. And you did mention that we have to look at the societal aspect of this issue and how to continue putting this pressure on governments and on the main players. I think your very interesting also reflection on the demise of the Cold War and how it happened. But as you said, we don't have time now to prepare. We have to act very, very quickly. I would like to involve now into the debate Ms. Kim, who is the Secretary General of Climate Change Center. This is, as I understand, probably one of the biggest organizations here in Korea that is precisely doing what we think the civil society should do. Maybe you could share your experience and how you see also the future of the issues that we are debating here. And if you allow me, because I think you're a Secretary General also of Green Asia organization. This is another head that you have, an organization with an interesting also mission, I think the reforestation, and through this process, I would not like to, I took a long quote of your mission statement. I'm not going to quote it, but I think the idea to, through this process also put bridges and bring closer the North and the South on the Korean Peninsula on the basis of the climate is a very, very interesting approach. So please.
Thank you for introducing the Climate Change Center and Green Asia organization. And first of all, I'd like to big thank you to the president of Gyeonggi University. And personally, I'm very delighted to the first day of the International Peace Day. And then, you know, the peace, you know, is linked to the climate change. It's quite very impressive. I can't imagine the peace is related to climate change, but yes. And then today is also a very historical day. As you may know, the two leaders from the South and North Korea are now having a meeting in Pyongyang to make a road for denuclearization and kind of a former peace agreement. We hoped this meeting have a good success for the peace. And to start with deliver my opinion, I'd like to introduce my organization, Climate Change Center and the Green Asia organization. And the Climate Change Center was established in 2008. It just this year we celebrated 10 years. It's a little young organization as compared to international organization or Korean environmental organization. But we are the first non-profit, non-governmental organization regarding, especially dealing with the climate change issue. And then our organization is established by the former Prime Minister, and then a third chairman also Prime Minister, and then current chairman is the former chairman of the National Assembly. So they always teach us, teach me, whenever you deliver a message, and then you have to check the majority of the audience. And if the majority audience is Korean, and then the translation is provided, you should deliver message in Korea. So, so may I excuse 5 distinguished speakers to allow deliver my message in Korea? Thank you very much. Yes. 제가 배운 거는 꼭 실천을 해야 되기 때문에 양해를 구하고 한국말로 말씀을 드립니다. 요청을 하셨던 것처럼 시민사회가 그러면 기후변화 대응을 위해서 어떤 활동을 하고 있는가를 좀 몇 가지 설명을 드리고 싶고, 실제로 여러분들 올해 경험을 하셨던 것처럼 폭염이라는 이슈 때문에 다행히 많은 시민들이 기후변화 이슈에 대해서 관심을 갖게 되었습니다. 저는 이 기회를 놓치지 않았으면 하는 바람이 좀 있는데, 이게 그렇다고 이상기후가 와달라고 요청을 할 수도 없고, 실은 우리에게 현안이 너무 많습니다. 그래서 이 현안 속에서 기후변화 이슈가 자꾸 후순위로 밀려납니다. 저희가 하고 있는 활동 중에는 마리아 선생님께서 말씀하셨던 교육 사업도 굉장히 중요한 포션을 자리 잡고 있고, 그리고 더 나은 기후변화 정책들을 위해서 정책을 제안하고 애드보커시 활동을 통해서 더 나은 정책들이 만들어지는 입법 활동도 같이 제안을 하고 있는데, 그런 과정 중에서 항상 소위 말해서 이제 가장 윗단에 있는 청와대에서는 지금 현안에 자꾸 이게 밀린다. 그래서 이 기후변화 이슈를 어떻게 시민들로 하여금 나의 일인지를 공감하게 만드는 그 부분이 저희가 고민해야 될 가장 큰 부분이기도 합니다. 한때 폭염이 오기 전에 한때 미세먼지라는 이슈 때문에 기후변화를 연결시키려는 노력도 했습니다. 그리고 실제로 그걸 가지고 연결시키려고 지금 상당히 노력을 하고 있고, 그 한 예로 설명을 드리자면 아담스 교수님께서 설명하셨듯이 이제 파스퓨어 화석연료에서 나오는 부분이 이산화탄소 온실가스 부분을 굉장히 많이 배출하기 때문에, 그러면 우리가 쓰고 있는 다양한 에너지원 중에 온실가스를 가장 급격하게 그나마 온실가스를 감축할 수 있는 에너지원을 좀 덜 쓰게 하는, 이 덜 쓰게 하는 게 시민들의 행동을 조금 더 바꾸게 하는 것도 중요하지만, 그거 갖고는 지금 오늘 강연을 들어보니까 정말 택도 없는 일인 것 같습니다. 그래서 뭔가 정책 입안자들이나 이 사회를 움직이고 있는 금융들이 이 화석연료를 안 쓰게 하는 방법들이 뭐가 있을까 이렇게 고민을 하다가 이번 정부가 들어서 새롭게 도입한 그 국민청원이라는 게 있습니다. 국민청원에 대해서 이 한국 분들은 이제 꽤 이제 익숙하시겠지만, 그래서 online national petition. So this President Moon introduced the online national petition, and is to listen the citizens' voice. 그래서 저희가 이 국민청원을 통해서 더 이상 국민연금과 같은 공적 기금이 석탄 화력이나 같은 그런 발전소를 지은데 돈이 투여되지 않게끔 하는 그런 국민청원을 지금 준비를 하고 있고, 이게 당장 여러분도 아시는 것처럼 당장 어떤 계획들을 바꾸려고 하면 그거에 관련된 기득권층의 반발이 너무 심합니다. 그래서 지금 당장 끊으라고 요청하지 않습니다. 저희가 2020년 새로운 기후변화 체제가 준비가 되고 2021년부터 새로운 기후변화 체제가 들어가는데, 그러면 우리는 2021년부터라도 우리가 내고 있는 국민연금이 화석연료, 소위 말해서 미세먼지랑 관련되는 석탄 금융에는 더 이상 투자되지 않게끔 하는 그런 작업들을 지금 한쪽에선 준비를 하고 있고, 또 하나는 앞서 말씀하셨던 것처럼 개도국은 선진국의 산업혁명으로 이제 선진국들이 잘 살고 있는 동안에 지금의 기후변화, 지구온난화 현상으로 인해서 개도국들은 굉장히 피해를 좀 보고 있는 상황입니다. 그래서 저희가 하고 있는 또 하나의 섹터 중에 하나가, 한국이 개도국과 선진국 사이의 브릿지 역할을 하기를 원하는 것처럼 한국에 있는 NGO도 그런 역할을 하려고 지금 개도국에서 기후변화 적응이나 대응에 대한 역량 강화 활동을 준비를 하고 있는데, 이 과정에서 어떤 사업을 하나 발굴해가지고 그런 사업들을 지원하는 사업들을 하고 있습니다. 예를 들면 생각보다 개도국에 많은 시민들, 많은 이제 주민들이 적절한 취사 도구를 보급받지 못하고 있습니다. 그래서 여전히 가면은 그 벽돌을 3개 놓고 취사를 합니다. 그러다 보면은 음식을 하는데 5시간, 6시간씩 걸립니다. 그 음식을 하는 대부분의 사람들은 여자 또는 여성들 또는 여아들이거든요. 그래서 그 가구들을 대상으로 뭔가 제대로 된 에너지 효율이 좀 나은 스토브를 보급하는 사업들을 국내에 있는 기업들의 펀드를 받아서 지원을 하는 사업들을 지금 현재 동남아시아 3개 국가 아프리카에서 진행을 하고 있습니다. 저희가 이제 저희 바텀업 차원에서 할 수 있는 부분은 뭐 이 정도로 사업을 발굴해서 하는 것들이 있을 수 있겠는데, 제가 오늘 이 강연을 들으면서 그럼 우리가 시민사회에서 이 바텀업 차원에서 하는 이런 활동들이 지금 일어나고 있는 이 지구 온난화의 소위 말해서 이제 글로벌 워밍 카타스트로피라고 말씀하셨는데, 저는 거기에 정말 적극 공감을 하는데, 이거를 지금 우리가 하고 있는 이런 작은 액션들이 모여가지고 과연 막을 수 있을 것인가라는 약간도 아니고 많이 걱정됩니다. 그리고 제가 만나는 모든 과학자들이 It's too late 이런 말씀을 너무 많이 하십니다. 그래서 이런 상황에서 그러면 오늘의 이 와담수 교수의 강연은 실은 이런 미래에 있는 대학생들한테도 중요하겠지만 지금의 기업가들, 정치가들, 소위 말해서 오피니언 리더라고 하는 폴리시 메이커들이 좀 더 많이 들을 수 있었으면 하는, 그래서 그들로 하여금 뭔가 큰 용단을 내릴 수 있는 그런 액션들이 좀 나왔으면 하는, 그래서 말씀 주셨던 이런 클라이밋 엔지니어링이라든지 지오 엔지니어링 좀 테크놀로지한 부분에서 좀 투자가 많이 일어났으면 하는 그런 바람이 실제로 미래 세대들한테 한쪽에선 좀 더 많이 일어나야 되는 거 아닌가. 왜 얼마 전에 캘리포니아 서밋이 있었습니다. 미국에서 있을 때 그때 반기문 총장과 빌 게이츠가 네덜란드에서 기후위원회를 발족을 하면서 뭔가 기후변화에 대처하기 위해서 그 경제적인 인센티브를 주거나 뭐 이런 방법들을 찾기 위해서 빌 게이츠는 뭐 돈을 투자하겠다 이런 발표를 했는데, 저는 뭔가 지금 당장을 이걸 좀 지연시키거나 좀 더 해결할 수 있는 이런 테크니컬한 부분들에 대해서 투자가 많이 일어났으면 좋겠다. 우리가 할 수 있는 역할들은 있겠지만 자꾸 이런 강의를 들을 때마다 솔직히 이제 그 여기서 일하는 사람 외에 한 시민으로서 저도 이제 초등학생 아들이 있지만 괜히 너무 걱정이 되는 거죠. 네, 미래 세대들을 위해서 지금의 올더 제너레이션들은 지금 도대체 뭐 하고 있는 건가? 뭐 이런 생각들이 계속 들어서, 동시에 이 중간에 이 미드 에이지 그 제너레이션 입장에서 정말 매일 생각합니다. 그래서 이 시민단체 입장에서 할 수 있는 이런 부분과 함께 동시에 이런 오피니언 리더들한테 촉구할 수 있는 이런 역할들을 같이 고민해 주시고, 실제로 이런 메시지를 전달을 할 때 마레 선생님께서 말씀하셨던 것처럼 실제로 젊은 세대들이 이거를 감당해야 되는 부분들이기 때문에 더 많은 젊은 세대들이 이 이슈에 관심을 가져줄 수 있도록 해야 될 것 같고, 그 관심을 가질 수 있도록 시민단체가 그 역할을 또 해야 될 거라는 거를 또 다시 한번 절실하게 느끼면서 여기서 잠깐 마치도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 아시아 녹화기구 관련된 부분은 조금 더 큰 부분이기 때문에 제가 더 더 말을 해도 될까요? 네, 그 잠깐 말씀을 주셨는데 기후변화센터가 2015년에 북한의 황폐화 문제에 대해서 굉장히 크게 인식을 하고 아시아 녹화기구라는 것을 설립을 했습니다. 그러면서 한반도의 기후변화 대응을 하는 데 있어서 같이 활동을 하자, 그런 차원에서 아시아 녹화기구를 만들었고, 아시아 녹화기구는 2015년부터 북한의 황폐화를 방지하기 위해서 그들이 원하는 방식으로 임농복합, 식량과 에너지와 조림이 연결된 방식으로 지금 활동을 좀 하고 있습니다. 그 사이에 그 왕래가 없었는데 어떻게 지원을 했냐라고 물으시면 다 방법이 있더라고요. 그래서 산림협력 부분들은 그 조금씩 다른 네트워크들을 통해 가지고 지원이 됐고, 저희가 하고 있는 이 산림 녹화는 기존에 단순히 나무만 심는 것으로 국한된 건 아니고 식량과 물과 에너지, 조림이 다 한꺼번에 연결된 넥서스 방식으로 진행되는 그런 부분입니다. 이번에 남북 정상회담의 첫 번째 과제로 산림협력을 말했던 것도 실제로 북한이 황폐화됨으로써 인해서 이상기후로 인한 홍수와 가뭄에 너무 취약했고, 이 너무 취약한 부분에 대해서 그들이 피해를 많이 입었기 때문에 이 황폐화를 빨리 복구해야 된다라는 생각들이 있었습니다. 그래서 그 이슈 부분이 결국 북한 역시 기후변화로 인해서 피해를 겪고 있고, 그런 부분들이 그 산림을 복구함으로 통해서 그나마 조금 나아질 수 있게끔 지원하는 방향으로 지금 같이 하고 있습니다.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kim. I think you touched very important issues, and I would like to first congratulate you for the project of Green Asia and deforestation, but also for all the other efforts, and to encourage you to continue, because at some point he said, can we make a change? I think, yes, you can make a change, you are making a change, and I have to say that if it was not for this very strong pressure on behalf of the civil society, I remember the COP conference in Copenhagen, 2009, where there was an enormous expectation that leaders will agree on measures to stop climate this development, and nothing happened. And I remember the enormous frustration among the civil society group. They were literally besieging the palace conference hall in Copenhagen in order to express their disappointment and their anger. So I believe it's very important that the pressure stays. I think it's very important to educate. I think it's very important to continue advocacy in this particular area. And also, I think it's important because of the urgency of the matter. And some of you said also whether technology is enough, that time is running out, that we have to take certain measures. And in the lecture also of Professor Wadhams, this was at the end of the day, there were kind of a couple of future or current development of technologies, but it's very interesting also to listen from Mr. Song Joon Kim, what he thinks about it, whether can this issue be solved by technical means? Some expressed doubt about it, and I know that the Korea Polar Institute is doing an incredibly important work. The bios that we have seen and the expedition that 2014 Professor Wadhams also mentions in his paper. Could you share with us your experience?
Sure. Thanks, Madam. Before I get into my address, I'd like to celebrate Kyunghee University about this really meaningful event about world peace and what is this transformative civilization. But to me, the civilization is in contrast to the climate change issue, because our civilization made this huge problem. We cannot, it's not very easy to resolve. Even though Peter went over what's going on in the polar region, I would like to briefly go over, because I was in the Antarctica for the entire year last year as an overwintering team leader, and I just would like to share my feeling when I was there. If you go to Antarctica, especially in the West Antarctic, now the iceberg is retreating about 30 meters per year. It's already several decades, and it's really fast ice melting rate. I'm talking about the land ice. Peter was mainly talked about sea ice. Sea ice is growing again in winter, but the severe problem is in summer, sea ice extent or cover is retreating very rapidly in the Arctic. So probably in several tens of years, in summer, there will be no more sea ice in the Arctic. We have some evidence. Actually, the Arctic sea ice has a longer history than Greenland ice. It's about more than 60 million years ago, you started to grow the sea ice in the Arctic. But we are very imminent moment to probably see some disappearance, even though it's in the summer season. Still, we need to take into quite serious. Whenever I discuss in this kind of panel, there are lots of words, lots of worrisome, but no action at all. So I think there is some big problem, because the reason is probably we try to resolve this into national level, but I don't think it will work in national level. The global leaders need to get together somewhere, and then they need to do some action. Otherwise, there is only a way, technological solution, but we have lots of risk, because we never know what will happen if we, play around with this Earth. I think everybody realized that. As Peter said, Arctic is warming very rapidly. So there are we call it polar vortex. It's circling around the Arctic. It has a very strong wave. Now it's very wavy. So in winter, you experience very severe cold air outbreak, including Korea, Eurasia, North America. And people thought this vortex is only influencing in winter season. But now people tend to realize maybe this will influence some more heat waves. We all experienced the last summer, right? 39.6 in Seoul. It's really a record-breaking after 1994. If the weather is cold, you can have some solution. Nationally, you can have policy. But if weather is too hot, there's not much choices. Because we need too much energy to resolve that. I think we all experience that. So, and also if you listen to radio recently, there was a huge hurricane, Florence, touched to the North and South Carolina border. Even though the hurricane was rapidly weakened, lots of precipitation. Even though we know it's coming, people escape lots of people escape, but still 70 people killed. And also another typhoon, Mangkhut, through Philippines and hit Hong Kong. And people think maybe there will be category 6 typhoon or hurricane will be produced. Because the ocean is warming and warming, atmosphere is always and also very cool. There are lots of big contrasts between atmosphere and ocean. They make huge energy to this typhoon to grow. So as a conclusion, the problem is from increase of greenhouse gas. Even though the heat wave, cold air outbreak, big hurricane, or severe drought in spring may not be related to global warming, because scientists cannot give any evidence to the relation. That is the problem. And because I'm a scientist, I don't know exactly what's the relation between global warming and these extreme weathers. But we are not living on the global warming. We are living on the very, very extreme weather every day. So we should take this into very serious. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. I agree with you that probably the term warming was not very fortunate at the beginning of this, because people imagined something beautiful in the warm weather, and we know that what it leads actually it's to winters, fierce winters like you had here during the Pyeongchang Olympics, very cold and then very hot summers. But before probably opening also for some questions from the floor, we still have some 10 minutes. I would like to ask Professor Wondhams something that many of you have put forward as a problem. It is about decision makers listening to scientists. It is about the interface between science and policy. A big issue that at that time Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, I know, has taken the initiative to create a scientific advisory board with him, with the support of UNESCO, in order to touch upon this issue of science policy interface. I would enlarge it and say science policy society interface, particularly when we speak about climate change, because science is about society at the end of the day. But how to make politicians listen? Do they listen to you? Do they take into account what you are saying so that they take afterwards? Apart from the issues of global governance, Ms. Kim also mentioned this. She wished that politicians listen to the lecture today. How you see this?
Well, it is a very severe problem, as you say, and it's a matter, in a way, of the politicians themselves becoming educated, because the politician that I found who most well understood climate change, was most active to do something about it, was Margaret Thatcher, who is perhaps a politician one wouldn't admire for other things, but in the case of global warming, she understood the problem very, very early. She was a chemist by training, so she understood atmospheric chemistry and immediately cottoned on to what was going on and was instrumental in setting up Hadley Centre for Climate Change and in trying to bring about the beginnings of international agreements. So the sort of efforts that led in the end to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and to the set of agreements with which, of course, some were abortive, the efforts made in Copenhagen, for instance, but eventually led to the Paris Agreement. Those agreements could probably have been made 20 or even 30 years ago if we had the drive of Margaret Thatcher, because it was a drive and she was really obsessed with global warming and the problem of it. So there's a case of a politician who understands a problem, takes it on, and could do something about it. In fact, unfortunately, she lost power when she was about to do something about it. So but then, since then, in Britain, for instance, we haven't had any politicians who've understood climate change at all, although all of them have played lip service to our need to do something, and they've gone along with international agreements, but they haven't led, they haven't done any inspiring. And trying to think of politicians who have done some inspiring, but it is hard. It seems that the scientific, well, Al Gore, I suppose, yeah, the scientific consistent view about climate change is something accepted by politicians in their minds, but not in their hearts, so they don't really make it the biggest activity that their country should be involved in, which in fact it is. So I don't know how to answer your question, except that we should have politicians who are trained in science, and we don't, at least not in Britain. And in the world, I hope we can find ways to get the message of climate change across to politicians in a way that will make them perhaps just realise it's in their interests as well as the interests of the world to be active, to think about what would be good for that politician's career. In a way, you have to descend to that level in order to get something happening. But I really feel, from my own experience, rather pessimistic about the rate at which we can get politicians to take action. We will in the end, but only when disaster's facing in every direction.
Well, thank you very much. Not very optimistic, but it doesn't mean that we should not continue working with politicians. So I do believe that what you said about science is very important, science among political class globally and understanding about it. And here, I believe we should use all opportunities to spread this message. I believe we have, Dr. Shin, we have some minutes also for exchange with the, I think it was very interesting from very many different perspectives what we have discussed today, and I'm sure that there will be probably some questions or opinions expressed or some suggestions, so the floor is open. If you have any, yes, please. Yeah, and then there. And please indicate, if you could present yourself and then probably indicate to whom this question is addressed.
Do you hear me? Yes, my name is Sir, and I would like to thank you, Peter, for the wonderful presentation. It was amazing to see all those lifetime results in such a way. I understand the impact of this climate change, and I understand the title of the Farewell to the Ice. But I'm a little bit more interested by the social aspect of this climate issue, more to that young lady than to Peter, because Peter is a scientist, and scientist, his job is to observe. He did observe, and we understand a little bit better. But we should ask to all ourselves, what do we have to do? That is I think the issue. I think everybody will agree that the Industrial Revolution is made by British, and we can say that the political revolution is made by French, and from that point, the issue is that the environmental issue is like a human right. It belongs to everybody. This is your right. So we have to be involved in social way, as a right, and try to be responsible and to participate as a democratic in a democratic world. And in France, for example, there is a minister of the environment who resigned because you are criticizing politicians who don't listen. It's not true at all, because they are in the same dilemma as all of us. For example, this prime minister, he said he put some target to try to reduce, to try to do something, but it doesn't match with this economic criterion, which has to be 3%. And they are told to shut down the nuclear power, but it's impossible. Otherwise, we have to change our way of living. So the solution is not something that we can find very quickly. It is made of our conciseness of this problem, and also the transit technical evolution. We have to find the way out to solve this issue. The other professor has compared this situation as a Gorbachev Köln meeting, saying that it has happened, the opening and the miracle. But he's very optimistic, because Stalin can come in this issue. I think I'm more pessimistic than he's optimistic, because if we don't do things every day to solve this issue within society, within our right, there is no solution. Stalin will come, and we will starve the hunger and all these catastrophic scenarios. That's what I want to say.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a question, but also a very interesting reflection and about the complexity of issues from the point of view of economic development and others. I don't know whether Ms. Kim or Professor Wadhams want to comment, or we just take up the next question, and maybe at the end we will touch upon this issue as well. Please, the second row.
Hi, I'm Hyun Soo-em, a journalist from the Korea Herald. I really enjoyed the talks today. I want to pose this question to Dr. Wadhams. So the panel addressed that policymakers need to listen more. But do you believe there is a concerted effort by a group of people, be it politicians or scientists with differing views, who want to deny or play down the importance of climate change? Yeah, that's my question. Now, also, another one is, because you mentioned that you got an offer out of the blue from the university to translate the book. So were you surprised by it when they offered?
Thank you, Professor Wadhams.
Thank you for the question. Well, when I said out of the blue, I didn't mean it was completely unexpected. What I thought was, this is a very wonderful gesture by the university, and I'm grateful for it. But regarding climate change denial, yes, there's a very powerful lobby, or has been, of people who not necessarily deny climate change, but want to play it down so that we don't have to take any action. And there's a very good book about this called Merchants of Doubt, which also referred to people who are trying to do something about smoking, that you know something is really harmful or disastrous, but in order to avoid taking any action which will cost you or your employer money, you try to cast doubt on its existence or the seriousness of the problem, so that you then can get away with making big profits out of it for a while longer. It's a really discreditable activity, but it works, and it's been applied by the oil industry in particular, and by some other fanatics who make profits out of use of fossil fuels. So it's the fossil fuel industry feels they can make money out of continuing to dig coal, then you will have them running a lobby that will try to cast doubt on the existence of climate change in order to continue to make those profits. And the success is extraordinary in that in America, every Republican senator and every Republican candidate for president has to deny climate change as a kind of statement of faith, really. They just have to say it doesn't exist, otherwise they would never be able to run for office.
Thank you, Professor Wadham. I think we are at the end of our, maybe just I will turn to our panelists if they want to add something to this debate, listening to the others. We will continue, of course, partially discussing this issue of the governance, which is critical in my view, because it is very much linked to all the topics that we were discussing about the science policy interface, about the need for political commitment. I think what is very important is to have political commitment, albeit all the other economic or considerations of different type, the need also for more science and the integrity and the belief, the conviction that science really can lead, and of course the hope that new technologies could solve in a quite rapid, disruptive, revolutionary manner some of the issues. At the end of the presentation, I think this was the optimistic note, because I want to finish this debate on an optimistic note, that we have to continue using technologies, we have to continue the advocacy, the research, in the hope that we will find a global solution, common solution to a global challenge. Yes, of course, please.
Just two brief comments. First, I wanted to support what you said, Ms. Kim, particularly one point you just touched on, but I thought it was so important. One of the problems we have in confronting climate change is because for a large number of people on Earth, the future is not the problem. The problem is now. The problem is food today or jobs today. And this issue came up in the discussions of the Club of Rome because we used to be very much focused on the climate issue almost entirely until we recognized that it's very difficult to get attention of large numbers, billions of people, where the job and the income are so critical. And that's what I was trying to say when I agree with you that this is linked to all the SDGs, and it can't be solved in itself because we won't be able to build the critical political will we need to support this unless it's part of an overall plan. And unfortunately, it's such a big problem in itself. We think, well, especially for the wealthy people, well, let's focus on our big problem. But that just doesn't hold gravity. My other comment was, I liked what you said in your remarks. I just wanted to clarify. I was not trying to be super optimistic about what's going to happen in the next 3 years. I also just was trying to add a note of optimism that when the change really takes place, a radical change in behavior, it tends to happen very precipitously. And that's an argument to really work for that, rather than say, well, we haven't been able to do it for 10 or 20 years, and therefore we need to only rely on technology. We have to rely on technology too. But to indicate that we've been through an experience that shows that we are capable, human beings are capable of a very rapid radical change which nobody perceived as possible. And some of the optimism is to know the power we have to move towards something that has resisted up until now. And we know many things that we can do that can address this problem. Our frustration is the carbon tax and the other remedies. We have done it in a halting way, and it hasn't worked so far. I think that's an argument to push harder rather than to abandon it. That's all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Bautista?
Two quick comments. For those of you who were here last year at the Peace Bar Festival, and I was fortunate to be here last year, you heard me talk about the relation of the town and the gown. That there is a need for the Wadhams and the Jacobs. There's a need for the academic community to, for politicians to listen to the gown holders if they are to be relevant town leaders. So this is my gown and town relation. So the other comment, which is related to this, has to do with, I think, not so much looking for politicians who are themselves scientists, but making sure that the public servants are professional in their fields and let them be, rather than being a politicized cadre that inhabit what should be professionally trained scientists that takes care of CDC in the United States, rather than political appointees who would rather run those offices at the behest of politicians. So the other notion that I prospered last year as well has to do with the fact that we should not be looking for political will among politicians, because there is already a welling up of political will from the polis, from the very people, from the grassroots, from civil society, from NGOs, from the citizenry. What is lacking among politicians is the political courage and the wisdom to listen to academia, to listen to professional research, especially on climate change, and let them govern and stick their neck out and be courageous and exhibit wisdom, so that it should not be their political career that is being taken care of, but the sustainability and the flourishing of people and the planet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burgess. I think on this, particularly your last words, we could end up this discussion, Ms. Kim, because I think our time is out. Please, you have a minute.
Yes, thank you. 지금까지 들어본 바를 또 소감을 전달하면 결국 과학자들의 역할은 지속적으로 팩트를 정치인들한테 전달하는 거가 가장 큰 역할이라는 생각이 듭니다. 기후변화 협상이 어려움에 빠질 때마다 IPCC 보고서가 정치인들의 생각을 조금이나마 좀 바꿨습니다. 그래서 지금 아담스 교수님이 말씀하셨던 이 내용을 정말 너무 늦었다 하는 이런 보고서, 팩트를 기반으로 한 보고서들이 정치인들을 뿐만 아니라 금융을 움직일 수 있는 기업인들에게도 조금 원투원으로라도 전달이 돼서 이거에 대한 심각성을 좀 가졌으면 하는 거는 한쪽 틀에서 이루어졌으면 하는 바람이 있고요. 저희가 시민들을 만날 때마다 이 문제에 대해서 걱정하시는 시민들은 뭐 이런 말씀도 하십니다. 뭐 며칠 차 안 타고 다니는 거 이런 액션 말고 전 세계가 한날 한시에 갑자기 다 우리 차 타고 다니지 맙시다. 뭐 이렇게 레디컬한 액션을 좀 해야지만 이 문제를 막을 수 있지 않겠냐, 이런 정도의 수준의 요구도 하시는데, 그러면 이런 지금 우리가 SNS로 연결된 이런 사회에서 비단 우리나라뿐만 아니라 다 전 세계에 있는 NGO들이 같이 연결을 해서 뭔가 다 같이 할 수 있는 액션들을 한번 찾아보는 그런 상상을 하며 네, 저는 마무리를 하고 싶습니다.
Thank you very much. I was hesitating whether to put forward the question about politicians, and now I see how much we're into this, but I think it's important, the question. So with the voice of the civil society, I would like to end this debate, to thank all the panels. I think it was a fascinating debate that will not end here. We will continue to discuss it, and first and foremost, of course, to thank Professor Adams for this fantastic journey today that you led us. Also, I would say, with our shock sometimes at the foundings, with our sense of alarm, with our sense of urgency, but definitely to enlarge our horizon in terms of what should be done for climate change. So thank you once again, and thank you, Dr. Shin.
박수로 감사의 뜻을 표해주시기 바랍니다. 이제 마칠 시간이 되었는데요. 장시간 동안 함께 자리해 주셔서 대단히 감사드립니다. 내일 아침 10시 반부터 그 세계평화의 날 기념식이 이 자리에서 진행됩니다. 여러분의 많은 참여와 성원을 부탁드립니다. 오늘 이것으로 피스바 페스티벌 첫 번째 학술 회의를 모두 마치겠습니다. 여러분 감사합니다.